the shores of Lake Huron lies the small town of Goderich, Ontario. Known for its salt mine, its grain terminals, and its quiet streets, Goderich On the shores of Lake Huron lies the small town of Goderich, Ontario. Known for its salt mine, its grain terminals, and its quiet streets, Goderich is a place where the railways meet the water. Day after day, trains from the Goderich-Exeter Railway make the steep descent into the port serving the Parish and Hembecker grain terminal. But on February 1st, 2021, what began as a routine switching move became one of the most serious accidents in the railway's history. The Goderich-Exeter Railway, known as GEXR, has operated freight service in southwestern Ontario since the early 1990s. At Goderich, its main task is hauling covered hoppers loaded with grain down into the port where the Parish and Hembecker facility stands ready to load and unload the harvest of the region. To get there, the line drops sharply. From Goderich Yard to the waterfront is just a mile and a half, about 8,500 feet of track, but the grade is punishing, falling 100 feet at an average slope of 1.75%, with sections steepening to 2.78%. This grade has always been a challenge for crews. Trains must be carefully controlled to avoid running away. On this winter day, the train was designated 58101. It stretched nearly a third of a mile, 1,746 feet in length, and weighed more than 2,600 tons. At the front were two locomotives working in multiple unit control. GEXR 2073, the lead unit, and ROK 4095 positioned directly behind it. Behind them were 33 covered hopper cars. 14 of the cars were fully loaded with peas, while 19 were empty. Because of its length, the crew had to divide the train into two sections to fit into Goderich Yard. The locomotives were placed at the head of the train and prepared to shove the cut of cars down grade toward the Parish and Hembecker facility. The move was brought to a halt at mile 46.21, just 100 feet east of a split-switch derail, a protective device designed to stop uncontrolled cars from rolling into the port. The engineer applied a full-service application of the automatic brakes, which controlled the entire train and also set the independent locomotive brakes. With the train apparently secured, he rose from his seat to prepare for the next move. But as he did, the automatic brake handle was nudged into the release position. Silently, the train's air brakes let go. Only the locomotive brakes on GEXR 2073 and ROK 4095 remained engaged, and they alone were not enough to hold back the 2,600-ton train on such a steep grade. At first, the movement was slight, then slowly but surely, the train began to roll. The conductor, realizing what was happening, rushed to the back of the train and tried to apply the handbrakes on the final two cars, but the effort was hopeless. The massive weight had already overcome the brakes. The two locomotives and all 33 hoppers now surged down the 1.6-mile descent. Gathering speed, the runaway was unstoppable. At the bottom of the hill, the train tore through the terminal area. It struck an unoccupied 18-wheel tractor-trailer loaded with grain, reducing it to wreckage. Moments later, it smashed into a half-ton pickup truck in which two people sat. Miraculously, they were trapped only briefly and managed to escape with no injuries. Finally, the train slammed into an unoccupied shed, and finally the train slowed. The force of the impacts drove both locomotives GEXR 2073 and ROK 4095 and 4 loaded hopper cars off the rails, but they remained upright. No dangerous goods were involved, and by sheer luck, no one was killed. Still, the damage was extensive, and the near miss raised urgent questions about railway safety. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada launched a full investigation. They conclude that the runaway was triggered when the automatic brake handle was unintentionally moved to the release position as the engineer left his seat. The findings were stark. The locomotive brakes on 2073 and ROK 4095 alone could not hold the train on the steep grade. The locomotives lacked a rollaway protection system technology that could have automatically stopped the train. And the automatic brake handle on the lead unit had no locking pin, a simple device that could have prevented the handle from being bumped out of position. Following the derailment, both locomotives sustained significant damage. GEXR 2073, the lead unit, was heavily damaged but was repaired and returned to service and was back in operation by March 14, 2022. RLK 4095, the trailing unit, a rare straight GB40, was quite damaged. There are concerns about its repairability, but was ultimately repaired and returned to service. Both locomotives were out of service for approximately 1 year, undergoing extensive repairs before being returned to operation. The runaway of 2073 and ROK 4095 lasted only minutes, but in those moments, a chain of small oversights created a disaster that could have cost lives. It showed how even the most routine moves can turn deadly when safety systems fail, and how thousands of tons of steel, once set in motion, cannot be stopped.